So now I'm going to do a little introduction of Heritage Week this year. So I'm going to give you an idea of what we have planned and how we can support you. And also probably you're curious about the theme of Living Heritage and what that means. So this is exactly what I'm going to cover in today's talk, so a few things. As Virginia mentioned, the dates of National Heritage Week this year are the 12th to the 20th of August. So that's Saturday to Sunday. So over 10 days, we're looking forward to having events. And we're also welcoming online projects this year. So for the last few years, during COVID, there was the mainly focus on online projects. And we've decided this year to keep that going. So if you are involved in a group and you maybe decide not to do an event for whatever reason, there is the option of submitting an online project. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So what is Living Heritage? For ourselves, we take our definition from the European Heritage Days, and that's run by the Council of Europe. So they provide the theme each year, and we generally run with that theme. And they define it as the practices, knowledge, and skills that have been passed down from one generation to the next and are still in use today. So you can see it's quite varied in terms of things that you might think might qualify for that. And in terms of how we want to explore that theme, or how we're encouraging you to explore that theme, there's a few different ways in terms of the work being done by custodians of heritage, how yesterday's heritage has become today's heritage, and how can heritage be safeguarded for the future. In other aspects as well, there's a few different ways you can explore deeper. So in terms of intangible cultural heritage, we're talking about how heritage or skills or pastimes have been passed down from one generation to the next. And then we're looking at community as well in terms of shared heritage. So the way heritage can be provide a sense of identity and continuity, and it provides an opportunity for diversity and creativity. And that'll be explored further in other talks here today. Thank you. So we look at 2023 as an opportunity to explore who the audience for National Heritage Week events are and how we can work, or how you can work with more diverse audiences, and we'll be there to support you in that. And we'll have speakers today on that very topic. So just to give you another example of a definition of living heritage, and this is from UNESCO. So they are a much more wide-varying definition of living heritage, but it just shows that it is quite all-encompassing. And I'm going to give you a few examples here later on. So in terms of events, the approach, we are producing a 101 Event Ideas booklet, which will be published. It's actually live on the Heritage Week website today, so you'll be able to access that. The National Inventory for Intangible Cultural Heritage, if you just Google that, you'll find that. So Ireland has its own list, and there's a lot of different skills and practices and traditions on that list you might use for inspiration. And here's a few examples. So when I say living heritage, all these could qualify. So we're looking at everything from craft skills, so lace making, for example, embroidery, to built heritage in terms of thatching, dry stone mauling, lime plastering. And then you're looking at pastimes and sports, so everything from Gaelic games, obviously, and then other things, religious practices, like, for example, traditional festivals, so pattern days, and even pilgrimages, holy wells, things like that. So these are all just a few examples of what would qualify under living heritage. But again, there's no restriction in terms of you're running an event that you have to try or you have to adhere to the living heritage theme. Like, you can't put on events that don't adhere to the theme. But to give you ideas or inspiration, these are a few. So next few slides, I'm going to go through a few questions for you. I'm posing a few questions in terms of what you might do for your event. And then a few examples from previous events in terms of events that met the theme of living heritage. For example, for living heritage itself, again, the skills or traditions that have been passed down in your community. So I'd encourage you to maybe reflect on that. Maybe you'll have time later on today to think about, maybe there's people in the community like tinsmiths or people that have certain crafts or skills that they practice, and it might be an opportunity to bring those out into the public, to get them to do demonstrations or get them to teach people how to do them during Heritage Week. These are a few examples here we have from previous events. So I'm just giving an example of crafting with wool, and then we had the BD Pockets, which was an online project and that was celebrating traveller women's traditional crafts. In terms of cultural heritage, well, living heritage is a facet of cultural heritage. So in terms of ideas, you'll be looking at things like traditional music, traditional styles, Irish traditional dancing. Again, we have things like here the Sweat House, which was, I think it's in County Tipperary, which was an example of a place that was literally, well, it was a sweat house that they revived the practice there, or they went back and examined the building. And there's some inspiration here in the bottom in terms of the list, and I mentioned some of these already, but these slides will be available later, so we'll be able to pass on the links to you, so in terms of looking up different inspiration. In terms of built heritage, so the practices and skills of maintaining our built heritage, so when it comes to houses, but not just houses, in terms of farm buildings, and different practices in terms of dry stone walling, things like that. So think of those skills like that. And in terms of previous examples, we had traditional stone building workshops run before, stone crafts programs, etc. So there are some examples for you. And again, some inspiration at the bottom in terms of, for most of these crafts and traditions and skills, there tends to be a guild or association with them. And it's always worth reaching out to those in terms of getting some advice from them, and they might have some experts in your local area as well that they can provide information for you and even offer to help you host an event. In terms of natural heritage then as well, think about ideas of how we interact with nature and these practices and activities involving our natural heritage and living heritage practices. So I'll just give two examples here, but the question to probably think of is how we work to nature-based solutions in the modern world and what we can do to support our natural heritage. And that might be some inspiration for your Heritage Week events. And Katrin will probably speak more on that later in terms of sustainability. So we have 2 themed days for National Heritage Week. So the first one I want to mention is our Wild Child Day, and that takes place on Saturday, 19th of August. So Wild Child Day is basically to encourage children and their families to get out into nature. So we encourage children to explore the fauna and flora of their local area and traditions as well around natural heritage. So there is some inspiration there. In terms of Water Heritage Day, this is our second theme day, and this takes place on Sunday the 20th of August. So we run this in association with the Local Authorities Water Programme, or Law Pro. And what we want to do is look at and examine how we interact with our waterways, our lakes, our rivers, our water parks, and how you might think about that in terms of living heritage. So think about practices that humans interact with water in terms of fishing or water pilgrimages or things like that. And we have representatives here from Law Pro here today. So they have actually a table outside, so if you want to go talk to them, they provide some information. We also have Cathal speaking here later today. In terms of policy, so there is guidelines and policies for any events or online projects. In terms of you are submitting an event to the heritageweek.ie website, you have to abide by our guidelines. So the policy in terms of you should meet at least one of the following criteria. Generally, we'd expect you to meet 2. So one is maximize community engagement, as in reach the maximum of people you can. And then the second thing is include all age groups. So bring the different generations in your community together. In terms of policy, again, a few things here to think about in terms of promoting living heritage, the heritage value. So you must clearly promote one specific aspect of our cultural, natural, or built heritage. In terms of interpretation, think about things like having a balanced point of view. So if there is topics or something, you should offer don't offer opinions, but offer facts in terms of your presentation. And then in terms of have a clear awareness or educational value for anyone attending your event. So who can get involved in National Heritage Week? So who can organise an event? We have a few suggestions. So really it's for up to individuals, families, communities, organisations, and we also welcome cultural institutions, NGOs and businesses. So there is a lot of opportunity for different groups to get involved. So you don't have to be an historian, you don't have to be a local historian, you don't have to be a heritage person, you can get involved. So really, it's for everyone. So especially with this year with Living Heritage, think about not just yourselves, you're obviously here because you're involved in heritage, but think about other groups in your community. There might be, for example, a craft group, or there might be a tidy towns group, and they can get involved too. For example, the craft group might say, well, heritage is not for us, but as I just showed here, living heritage involves craft skills, so it might be something that they might get involved in. So it might be worth talking to them about it, or if you're involved in these groups, think about that and approach your fellow members. In terms of what events might look like for yourselves, in terms of thinking, running your event and organising your event, there's a few questions we pose here in terms of what's the goal of the event, what aspect of heritage do you focus on, the audience size, what would you like attendees to experience, and is your event sustainable? And we will have Valerie speaking later here today to talk more about in terms of inclusivity for an event and how you would think about putting on an event and maximising attendance in terms of accessibility. So I'll let her speak more about that later today. In terms of projects, you have the benefit of projects is you have a longer window, obviously. You're not confined to the 10 days of National Heritage Week. So you can take the long-term view. So there's a possibility in terms of, is there, like, for example, a building being restored in your local area, or is an ongoing project that might have received Heritage Council funding that you could document in some way? And you would have the opportunity with online projects in terms of you could create documentaries, there's podcasts, and you could do that to document it. So this is just examples of what you could do for online projects. As I just mentioned, you do videos, podcasts. You can do an online talk, so you can have webinars. You can also do recorded webinars, or you can also collaborate with local media as well to document and communicate your project. In terms of materials for yourselves, the practical stuff, so we will be supplying materials this year for our event organisers. And the way it works this year, it'll work through our heritage officers. So the heritage officers in your local county or local authority area, if you reach out to them, they will be able to connect you with materials for your event. So we'll have banners, we'll have flags, and we'll have banners as well. And these are all reusable, so the branding is so they can be reused. And some of you might have that material from last year, so we encourage you again to reuse it this year. But if anyone's required new material, those things will be available. For yourselves, in terms of support, if you want to get in contact with us, the Heritage Council team are available Monday to Friday from 9:30 to 5:30. There's also an email address, heritageweek@heritagecouncil.ie. In-person training we're happening here today, so we hope that gives you some support in terms of thinking about your event. We also have a lot of resources on the heritageweek.ie website. So I'll be speaking about that later today, but there's a huge range of resources in terms of links to different groups and also guides on not even just uploading your event, but guides in terms of putting together a podcast or documentary, etc. for online projects. So lots of resources there. And we will have more resources throughout the year, building right up to August in terms of there'll be blog posts on the Heritage Week website, so you'll be able to access them at any time. I just want to briefly mention our partners. You might not be aware. So National Heritage Week is run in conjunction with Fáilte Ireland and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and is coordinated by Heritage Council as part of the European Heritage Days. We have partners in terms of the OPW, the Local Authorities Water Programme, and the Irish Landmark Trust, and then we also have supporting partners with Irish Times and RTE supporting the arts. So we're very grateful for them for being partners of National Heritage Week. For you then, some key dates, finally. So in terms of when the website opens for submissions, it's from next Tuesday, the 2nd of May. So you'll be able to submit your events for next Tuesday. So if you want to get thinking about them over the weekend, and you'll be ready to go Tuesday morning. For the 14th of June, we have this deadline here for county guides. And I haven't mentioned this yet, and it might be mentioned by Amanda later, who's going to speak about the Heritage Officer supports. But we are encouraging local counties to publish county guides. So there's no national paper guide this year, and there won't be for the future. But we are encouraging local counties to publish local county guides. And some counties will, and some counties won't, depending on the Heritage Office and what availability they have and funding they have. But we have a deadline here for, if you want your event included, to be guaranteed your event is included, the deadline is the 14th of June. Then we have National Heritage Week itself from the 12th to 20th of August. And then for any events or projects or online projects that need to be submitted, the deadline is Tuesday, the 22nd of August. The final thing to mention, which I'll come back to later on today, is the Heritage Week Awards and the Heritage Hero Award. And that ceremony is going to take place in October this year, with a date to be confirmed. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later. Finally, just a quick mention on promotion. So in terms of National Heritage Week, if you are engaging with others, this is what National Heritage Week is, our core message. And then the hashtag, if you're using social media, if you are promoting your event on social media, this is the hashtag Heritage Week 2023. For myself, these are my contact details. So my phone number is there. I have the email address, as I said. And we're also active on social media. So we're Facebook, we're out on LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram. So please do get in touch with us if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help. And that's it. Thank you very much.